Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 3 of the anime series DanMachi, and this was just all kinds of badass. We pick up right where we left off with the heated chase of this giant silverback ape creature going after Bel and Hestia effectively, as seemingly sent, on their coattails by the goddess Freya. And I had a couple of you guys saying in the previous episode, discussion video, that you kind of wished they had wrapped everything up by the end of the previous episode. Bel would have gotten the new dagger and would have defeated the creature and everything like that. And I would use this episode as an argument to say they really couldn't have done that. It would have fallen too short had they, culminated everything with this particular chase and the battle. There was so much fantastic and tantalizing and beautiful characterization in this episode. It wasn't all about just, a half-hour long action sequence or a 25-minute long action sequence. There was a lot of heart and a lot of character that we got in this episode because they had prolonged it, and it amped up the drama and the tension that much more, I would argue, to have it continue into the third episode. And as I say, sort of, the pseudo-puppet master, we're seeing Freya very much cloaked and on rooftops watching this unfold. We learn, that basically the god Ganesha, he has called forth all of the other gods and goddesses, called for help, essentially, because we learn that 9 creatures have actually escaped or been let loose. And I think the reason for that is to sort of cover the tracks. Freya was trying to keep it on the down low, what the machinations and motivations of loosing this ape creature might be. If more than one creature got out, well, maybe there's something else going on. Of course, we do see that all of Ganesha's guards have they look like they had their faces sucked, and because she is the goddess of love and all of that, well, that makes sense. But nobody's really, coming to that conclusion in this episode. We do see that Loki and Eyes are the sort of chief among those who are trying to destroy these creatures that have gotten loose, and Loki's being all perv-tastic, trying to put the crystal, up Eyes' butt at one point. She really wants to get her hands on Eyes' butt. No problem with that. Who wouldn't? But in any case, I love, as I say, the characterizations. The bond between Hestia and Bel is at the forefront in this episode, and I couldn't love it more for it. Because even if you get past sort of the idea of any sort of romantic feelings between Hestia and Bel, mostly on her side, there is a very familial, very strong friendship, a bond of support. We find out in the, sort of precursor of this episode before the credits that Bel lost his one, I guess, surviving family member, his grandfather. I guess he'd been out adventuring and he fell down a cavern or somewhere they couldn't go and try to find him. Does beg the question, is he still out there somewhere? But this led Bel to dedicate his life to being an adventurer. I guess he kind of feels like, if I search the world, maybe I can find him, or maybe I can help others not have to suffer along these lines. And he was being turned away by every single familia he went to. They laughed in his face. He would get nowhere, and he was very much left to his own devices, much as the case was with Hestia, as we saw in the previous episode. She was left to her own as well. And so, as cliched and sort of, apropos, arguably, as it is, that old phrase, they were a match made in heaven, so to speak, because neither one of them had anyone else. And for that bond, for that care and concern they both have for each other, she's willing to move mountains for him and vice versa. I love, my sort of one minor gripe for this episode was how long it took for her to finally give him the dagger that she had forged by Hephaestus. I kind of wish they would have gotten to that a little bit sooner, but it did involve the ritual of upping his stats and, explaining the situation to him a little bit, and he finds out a little bit more after dispatching the creature. But we see that he is just uber skilled, and I love that Eyes was there to witness, and we also find out Seer was too, even though I don't remember seeing her, but they were both there to witness his just badassery, his using this weapon, his stats being upped, and he just tears this giant silverback ape creature down. And I was like, oh my God, I was in awe. I was like just so cheering him on, because it was like, you know, after we've seen how badly he handled the Minotaur creature that he had to be saved from, and he came back, you know, bloodied and beaten, trying to get out his frustration after being made fun of by one of Loki Familia's, you know, chief members. This was just great. It was like finally he's coming into his own, and it's because Hestia has such a bond with him, and she wants to support him so much, to thank him for the support he has given her. And I even love that little bit toward the very, very end where if you stay past the credits, you see that to make up for, you know, Hephaestus's forging this weapon, she's sort of got to wear that little red and white apron outfit, you know, work, I guess, in Hephaestus's little forgery or whatever you want to call it, her store, her shop. But what was very intriguing to me was toward the end, that point where after the creature is destroyed, you have, you know, Hestia just sort of falling unconscious. And this is where we finally call, you know, to Freya sort of close up. And she says something like, maybe that'll teach you, you know, to mess around next time, or something along those lines. Whatever the line of dialogue was, I forget exactly, but the emphasis seemed to suggest, at least to me, that maybe in creating this weapon, maybe, you know, Hestia was manipulated into doing so, you know, for the sake of making Bel stronger and all that kind of stuff. And Freya may be well aware whether Hephaestus is part of this or not, part of this machination and motivation or not, remains to be seen. But maybe she's aware that if Bel uses this weapon, so imbued with Hestia's sort of magic or power, whatever you want to call it, maybe she will lose sort of energy, or maybe it's siphoning out of her, something along those lines, because you do see her prick her finger at one point and the blood sort of sweeps across the blade as if to say it's connected to Hestia. So should Bel continue to use this blade of Hestia, maybe it will have a negative impact on her. Maybe it will continue to weaken her. Maybe it will eventually kill her. And he'll, you know, have to stop using it. I don't know. That's just my sort of theory working as to what we saw. But I just find it, you know, absolutely captivating and compelling, this entire episode. Toward the very end, as I say, just before the end credits, actually, we have another one of the, what I assume to be is, you know, like one of the main characters debuted, very small in stature, carrying one hell of a huge, you know, bundle on, I'm assuming it's her back, and being very belittled by somebody she's traveling with. She's supposed to be a supporter of this person, and he's like, well, you know, if we run into monsters, I'll use you as a decoy. And yeah, real nice attitude there, Jerko. And you know, so I know we see her in both the opening credits and the closing credits, traveling around with a red-haired dude, and I'm assuming we're going to be debuted to these characters. And I still like that RPG aesthetic, that, you know, it's like the boss battles and fighting monsters, gaining crystals for money, you know, all this kind of stuff. But then there's also that added aspect of, when you're playing an RPG, especially in the early going of such an RPG, there's building your friends, you know, your group, your unit, your party. And I very much get sort of that aspect of this show. Like, you know, you basically have Bel, he's working with Hestia, and then he meets Seer, and then he meets Eyes, or vice versa, as the case may be. But even if they're not necessarily traveling with him, we know that some of these characters, whoever this red-haired guy is, and whoever this little, I'm assuming again that it's a girl with the giant bundle on her back, it seems as though they will become part of his party, or maybe even part of his familia. And that's very much that RPG sort of framework, that sense that I just love. I love the fantasy adventure RPG style of this show. And so yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the hell out of this particular episode. It was, you know, again, I have to go back to everyone who was saying that they wish they had just sort of wrapped it up by the end of the previous. I feel like everything that happened in this episode was necessary. We needed to see it play out this way. The pacing, the drama, everything that was involved, you know, little bits of comedy with Hestia herself, and just, I was grinning every time she smiled, every time she championed Bell to, you know, be the hero he could become and everything like that, even though she ends up weakened, even though, you know, she's left sort of, you know, so very much frail by the end of it. And of course you have that great sequence where they hug and he's crying because of how much she cares for him and how much he cares for her. This after, I might add, being told by Cyr, you know, she saw what he was doing and defeating this monster and she fell in love. Shortly thereafter, Hestia basically blatantly says, I love you too, and everything. Just, you know, barely grazing the harem aesthetics going on, but I don't care. I love this show. And so yeah, as I said, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of this episode if you've seen it, and where you think it's going. Speculation only, please. No spoilers from the, you know, origin material, as I always ask. But I love having the conversation with you guys, and I'd love to know if you're enjoying it. If this episode, you know, for those of you who felt like they should have wrapped it up, do you agree that this episode was necessary to play out the way it did, or do you wish we had just jumped that much further ahead? You know, anything goes in the comments below. So otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. I hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.